So this section is going to be a lot different than the last few videos that we watched. We're going to talk about proportions and solving proportions. So first we need to do a little bit of review of some vocabulary. I'm going to start with ratio instead of fraction. A ratio compares two things or groups of things, like girls to boys in a class, or tulips to roses, cheerleaders to football players, slides to swing on a playground. And you probably have seen them written, oops, that yellow marker is really hard to see, 3 to 5. 3 girls to 5 boys, or 3 tulips to 5 roses. Or you might also see it like this, 3 to 5. Boy, that's hard to read. I'm going to write this one in red also. You can literally write out the word T-O, between T-O, the word. You can write them like this. The last way, and you might not have seen it as much, you can write it 3 to 5. And then, all of a sudden you're going, but wait, Miss Kite, that's a fraction. Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, fractions are ratios. They're special ratios. Hold on a second. Fractions are ratios that compares parts to wholes. So if I was doing, say, how many girls are in their class, 3 out of 8 total. Well, that's a fraction. You can also write that as a percent. Percents are just special fractions that happen to have 100 as the denominator. 50% of the people in our school are female. That's a fraction. 50 out of 100. That's a fraction. And a fraction is just a special ratio that compares the part that you're talking about to the whole group. Now, proportional. Ratios are proportional if they are equivalent. So again, fractions are ratios. They're just fancy ratios that compare parts to wholes instead of one group to a different group. Ratios are proportional if they are equivalent. So like 2 to 4 is equivalent to 1 to 2. It's also equivalent to 4 to 8. Those are all equivalent. We see them as equal fractions, but they're also equivalent ratios. If we said 2 girls to 4 boys, that might also mean that there are 4 girls to 8 boys, depending on what the scenario is. A proportion is 2 equal ratios. It's actually an equation. So like 3/4 equals 6/8. That's an equation. Now it's not a very good equation. Like, okay, that's nice. You can write 3/4 equals x plus 2 over 2x minus 1. And now you have a really crazy equation. And we're going to talk about how we solve very simple ones to very difficult ones. That's what we're pointing out. Okay, so that's the vocabulary revisited. Now, if you're going to solve by cross multiplication, you've done this before with your teachers. Now, I know that they did this scale up thing. I'm totally okay with that as long as it's not a decimal. If it's a decimal, things are bad. So like right here, it's not good. So here's how you cross multiply. You really multiply by the denominator. You multiply both sides by x, because when that happens, it cancels the x. But at the same time, you multiply both sides by 10. This denominator right here, because it cancels. You multiply both sides by the denominator. What happens is you end up getting 2 times x, see that? That's what's left, and 10 times 10. Now, I actually take the step to write that out because when we get more complicated, you will, believe me, appreciate it. Now, I'm going to back up and erase all that. Here's what we usually do instead of writing all that craziness, okay? Yes, you cancel the denominators. We call it cross multiplying, saying, hey, multiply those two. That's what we had before, right? 2 times x. Multiply those two. That's 10 times 10. Yes, I'm going to write it that way. I'm not going to write 100. I know I usually would write 100. There's an equal between. It's still an equation. This is a different way to write this equation by multiplying both by the denominator. 2x equals 100 now by multiplying those together. So divide both sides. You get 50. Cross multiplying is a quick way. I am urgently stressing that you should not use the way your 8th grade teacher taught you to multiply, divide. Multiply, divide. Because when you do harder questions, that won't work for you. So on this one, we're going to multiply across the equal sign in a diagonal. 4 times 6 equals 8 times v. That equal sign is very important. No, don't write them in 2 different steps on 2 different lines. Set 4 times 6 equal to 8 times v. Then you get 24 equals 8 times v. Divide both sides by 8. You get 3 equal to v. All right. Now, if you come over here, I'm going to change color, sorry, and cross multiply to solve. 3 times r equals negative 6 times 5. I don't know what my children are doing upstairs, but they're having a great time. 3r equals negative 30 when you multiply that negative 6 times 5. So r equals negative 10 when you divide. All right, so that's cross multiplying. That's a skill to review. Let's talk about using it. So the problems you're going to see are not going to be that simple. They're going to be a word problem like this. So on Planet Alert, there are 8 pibs to every 6 mim students. That's a ratio. 8 pibs to 6 mim students. I'm going to abbreviate. That's an 8. I'm going to erase that 8. It looks terrible. Good handwriting. Okay, 8 pibs to 6 mim students. If Farmer Yoy has 60 pibs on his Algebra farm, how many mim students are there? So we're going to assume that they have kind of the same ratio. 60 pibs to however many mim students. Now, it's really important that you put the pibs on top and the mim students on bottom so that you get it right. If you put 8 on top here and 6 mim students on the bottom, but you put the 60 pibs on the bottom over here, now your comparison doesn't make sense. Pibs to mim students, so this one has to also be pibs to mim students. If this one's pibs to mim students, that one's also pibs to mim students. Now, cross multiply and solve, okay? So 8 times x equals 6 times 60. And yes, I write that out every time. So 8x equals 3 times 360. Excuse me, I said that badly. 8x equals 360. So now when we divide, we get 360 divided by 8. Now, it says no decimals, you don't get to round. It says you may use a mixed number if you need to. So, let's divide. Hallelujah this time. No mixed numbers needed. It's just 45. But 45 what? We were solving for mim students. So 45 mim students. All right. So on the planet Boondin, there are 11 quarts to every 7 doubles. So 11 quarts to 7 doubles. Now, I honestly just abbreviate my units with the first letter so that I don't need to write them. Actually, I usually just put them over here off to the side so that my numbers and my equation doesn't look so funkadunk. So I put my little note to self over here off to the side. Quarts on top, doubles on the bottom. So 11 to 7, 120. Farmer Albert has 120 quarts on his pib farm. How many doubles? So 120 are quarts, so they have to go on the top. Doubles are going on the bottom, so we don't know how many there are. We're going to figure it out. I put X, you could put Y, you could put D for doubles. That would make total sense. Okay, so now we're going to cross multiply to solve because this is a proportion, 2 ratios that are equal, and we can solve it. So 11 times X should equal 120 times 7. Okay, so 11X equals 840. Now, when we divide 840 by 11, what do you get? I get a decimal this time. I get 76 and change. So 840 divided by 11. Remember to switch to a mixed number. That's 76. Now, multiply the 76 by the 11. That gives me 836. So when I did 76 times 11, I got 836. That must mean I have 4 left. Subtract, and I get 4 11ths remaining. So that is my leftover. It says use a mixed number if needed. If we get to round, you could just put 76. There are a few that say that, so careful. So on this guy, we have on Planet Vril, there are 11 friends to every 12 umps. So 11 friends to 12 umps. Now, I tend to not write that there. I get them out of the way. I do write it. I put friends and umps just off to the side so I know friends go on top, umps go on bottom. Bottom, top. Now, double has 40 friends on her tot form. How many umps are there? Friends, 40 friends. Friends go on the top. Friends are on the top. They go on the top. Umps, we don't know. they're on the bottom. So, again, I don't write those F's in there. I don't like that. It drives me nutty. You can call it F or excuse me, U for umps. I wouldn't call it F for friends because that's not what we're looking for. Now, cross multiply. 12 times 40, whoops, should equal 11 times x. And then multiply and solve. So I got 480 equals 11x. When I divide, I get a decimal. I get 43 and some change. So remember, I did 43 times 11. That gave me 473. And when I subtract that from 480, I get 7. So my remainder is 7/11. It said to use a mixed number, so I did. I think that might have changed over time, so you might be able to round or use a decimal, or just round to 44. Okay, 44 umps, since that's what they asked. Now, you have to be careful. This time it says 8 decibels to 5 allibers. Now, this time he has 100 allibers. Allibers are on the bottom. These 100 allibers have to go on the bottom. It asks how many decibels. You need to have the decibels go on the top. Decibels are on the top. They have to both be on the top, or they won't be giving you the right ratio. Now, I don't like these. I think they're annoying. I get rid of them. Now I just have an equation. I can solve it. I'm a math geek. What can I say? Math makes more sense if I just have the math. Equals 5 times x if I do the other side. Now, I get 800 equals 5x. Wow, that all blurred together, didn't it? Divide by 5, 800 divided by 5 is just 160. 160 decibels. Okay, now, so you see that they can be flip-flopped. 6 tots to 13 kents, it says. On the planet Roo, there are 6 tots to 13 kents. Oh, my heavens. They dropped something upstairs. If Farmer Jupe has 80 kents on her quart farm, how many tots? We don't know how many tots, but there are 80 kents. We don't know how many tots, but the kents, they're 80. Whoops, almost wrote 60. They're 80. So you have to make sure the kents and the kents are both on the bottom. Okay, so now that I've set this up, I try to not have my things here. I do that afterwards. I tend to write them down and then erase them, or I put them off to the side. I tend to do like this. I keep hitting my little button. Well, I'm going to have kents. Okay, tots, kents. Okay, so now my 80 didn't become an 80. So now we're going to cross multiply. 6 times 80 equals 13 times x. Now we have to multiply. 6 times 80 gives you 480, and that's 13. Looks like I'm going to have to use my mixed number fun here again. I get 36 and something. I need a fraction. Okay, but I need to do 36 because it's a decimal. Okay, I need to do 36 times 13. Sorry, I did a side note there. That's equal to 468. So remember, when you change fractions to mixed numbers, you subtract, and we're going to get 12 there. Okay, that'll give you 12. So we have 12 13ths left. I don't know why you wouldn't just say 37, because you can't have a fraction of something usually on a farm, but, you know, work with it. It says use a mixed number, so we... Now, on this last one, there are 14 elentines to every 5 lerts. Now, I do elentines and lerts. I do cursive L so they don't look like one. Elentines and lerts. So I put that and that just so I remember which one's on top and bottom. I don't like mixing this up. We have 40 lerts. Lerts, where do they go? Lerts, I made my little note over here. They go on the bottom. Okay, so the 15 was the lerts. The 40 has to go on the bottom. Lerts go on the bottom. On the decibel farm, how many elentines are there? Elentines were on the top. See, right here, elentines are on the top. I put my question mark, my X, what I'm looking for, on the top. So cross multiply and solve. Okay, so multiply 14 times 40. That should equal the other cross, 15 times X. Don't forget that equal sign in the middle, or you're in deep kimchi forgetting your answer. 14 times 40 gives you 560. Now we have to, oopsie, I wrote a 0 instead of an x. Let's fix that problem. Now we have to divide both sides by 15. And you get a decimal. Luckily, it's 37.3, which I know already. The fraction is 1/3, so I don't need to write or go through all that mess to get my mixed number. I just know it. And there you be. Now you've got it all.